BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Black Box Ned 88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. So I was listening to a program and they started talking about serial killers, and one of the people they happened to mention was an individual named Herb Baumeister. And I was just like, the name didn't ring a bell. I had never heard of him before. And that put me down a pathway of just trying to learn more about him and learn as much as I could. Because do you ever just have those moments when something catches your attention and you're like, I really want to know more about this? So that's how I started learning about Herb Baumeister, also known as the I-70 Strangler. And yes, indeed, Herb Baumeister was born on April 7th, 1947, and he would go on to launch a 16-year reign of terror, more or less, on the Midwestern part of the United States. And I said more or less because this is a serial killer case where a lot of the facts are open-ended. A lot of things are not very precise. We can't necessarily say how many people he murdered, and we cannot necessarily say every action or thought process that he experienced, and there's a very specific reason for that. But yes, indeed, we're going to the city of Indianapolis in Indiana, and Herb Baumeister was someone who led a double life in every sense of the word. He was a closeted bisexual, and he was married. And there's a documentary out there about him, and the first one that I watched was from Shockumentary's Serial Killers. It is 33 minutes long, and this one was a pretty good film, but they started with his time in college, meeting his wife in college, and that is where they wanted to begin the story. And I thought that that was rather strange because with many serial killers, I mean overwhelmingly with serial killers, we start at childhood. I mean, we even mentioned Dr. James Fallon recently on this channel, who said that to be a serial killer, there are usually three major components. Number one is neurological function. Number two is genetics. There's something in the genes. And number three is childhood abuse or experiencing some type of childhood trauma. And Dr. Fallon is very precise when he says that it is usually all three different elements, because Dr. James Fallon's own neurological structure is rather similar to that of a psychopath, and he has something in his genetic traits that is also similarly found in serial killers, but he didn't experience childhood abuse, so he didn't go on to become a serial killer. But the thing is, though, we can't necessarily ask Herb Baumeister any of the questions to find out more for some reasons that we'll say for some reasons that we'll discuss later on. I'm almost certain that there are definitely overlooked aspects in Baumeister's life that people really didn't get to examine, because I don't mean to give away the ending, but he would go on to commit suicide once the police were investigating him and he thought there was a high chance of getting caught. First, he would escape the country. He would flee the United States of America, go into Canada, and when he was in Ontario, he went to a place called Piney Provincial Park, and he committed suicide from gunshot wound to the head. But when you want to talk about the life of Herb Baumeister, yes, indeed, he met his wife, Julie. They got married, and Herb dropped out of college, though, and I believe he only actually went through one semester in college, and he was that type of intelligent individual who didn't do much with his abilities. He became the gifted underachiever for a long period of his life, and there's a particular word that really stands out to me when we're discussing Herb Baumeister, and that is antisocial behavior. I'm seeing this off the charts. And when I use the word antisocial behavior, I mean it in the very technical sense that he was against the social norm. Because sometimes I've referred to serial killers as being antisocial on this channel, and people are like, no, you got to talk to people who knew him. He was a very talkative individual. No, I don't mean that they are not talkative or that they are not desiring to be in social situations. In fact, Herb Baumeister greatly loved being in social situations. In fact, it just means against the social norm or abnormal behavior. He exhibited a lot of abnormal behavior in not the documentary from Shockumentaries, but I was listening to one that was uploaded on the channel Brian Roberson. Big shout out to Brian Roberson, mind you. He uploaded the documentary Serial Killer Herb Baumeister, aka the I-70 Strangler. And with this one, they were talking all about how he would do things in a very bizarre way. Baumeister, that is. He would do things in a very abnormal way. He had an abnormal sense of humor. At one point in his student tenure as a student, he urinated on a teacher's desk because he thought it was funny. And then after his student life, he urinated on his boss's desk, once again thinking that it was funny, and there was some letter that was written to a governor, and he urinated on that as well. But one of the things that really shocked me is he urinated on his boss's desk, but for some reason he wasn't fired from that job. Herb Baumeister and his wife Julie would go on to experience a certain degree of success in life. They would end up opening a chain of stores. They were the Save-A-Lot thrift stores, and when I heard Save-A-Lot, I thought of the very famous grocery store, but this, I believe, was something different. I believe this was actually a chain of thrift stores. Sometimes that's a hard word to say. Thrift stores, and it was spelled S-A-V, Save-A-Lot, and he opened a chain of thrift stores, and that became his career, and they actually entered into a certain sense of financial success, and they were able to purchase an 18-acre property, Fox Hollow Farm. They came into the possession of an 18-acre property, the Fox Hollow Farm, and this is going to be very critical to the thought process. And Fox Hollow Farm, it in itself, really affected the choices and decisions made by Herb Baumeister. And the thing to say about this one is that Herb Baumeister was a closeted bisexual, and he preyed on men. He would go to gay bars, and he would lure men back to this estate. He would lure them back to Fox Hollow Farm. And the way that I understand this was, when he's in the gay bar, he's talking to other men and he's telling them, oh yeah, I got this new property. It's in the forest. We have a swimming pool. He's telling them all the features of this mansion, and he's trying to sell them on how he's a successful businessman and he has all these wonderful things. So then he would invite them to go back, all on times when his wife was out of town. And what, if I understand as well, what they kind of laid out his process was, he was about sexual asphyxiation, erotic asphyxiation. And they theorized that this is something that he would have genuinely tried in terms of erotic pleasure that he would have wanted to do just as a sex act, living this double life as a bisexual. But at one point, he escalated to do it through performing it on somebody else, and he decided to take it all the way and terminate the life of the person that he had lured back to his home. He definitely operated prior to the purchase of Fox Hollow because, I mean, he's called the I-70 Strangler. Before owning this massive property, this 18-acre ranch, what he would do is he would dump the bodies in various places, particularly in water sources, but in various places that you could access from the sides of the road. And that is how this crime spree started. After the purchase, and after the acquisition, we should say, of the Fox Hollow Farm, he had this 18-acre property, so he would keep the bodies there, pulverize the bones when possible, and in one of the, I want to find the source for that one. It was on one of the paranormal channels, the Paraholics it was called. They mentioned that he would even use the bones as gravel on places in the property. And actually, when they investigated the property, they found more than 5,000 bone fragments were scattered around Fox Hollow Farm, and it has become a major site for ghost hunters. Countless channels on YouTube are talking about ghost hunting. That's how I got on to the Paraholics. I thought it was just going to be talking about the skeletons of Fox Hollow Farm, but it's a ghost hunting investigation video. There are countless ones of them. Seek the Truth Paranormal and The Haunting and Haunted Homicide, Once Upon a Crime. There are just so many things that are talking about Fox Hollow Farm and how Herb Baumeister operated. So this is his primary method. When his wife is out of town, he lures men back to the farm. One time, he is trying to convince somebody to be erotically asphyxiated. He's telling them after they're really intoxicated that they're going to be having the best orgasm of their life from erotic asphyxiation. And he's trying to asphyxiate the guy, I believe using a garden hose. And the guy realizes this person's trying to kill me. He's not joking. So what happens is he goes limp and pretends to be dead. And then Baumeister releases the tension, and very quickly the guy's able to regain his senses. And then once he regains his composure, Baumeister doesn't want to fight the guy because he's 6 feet 7 inches tall, the victim, that is, and he could easily overpower him. And there's actually an episode of Dexter, the serial killer show Dexter, when something very similar happened. Dexter messes up the execution, and the person is much bigger than him and is able to fight him off. However, though, Baumeister and this guy don't necessarily get into a fight, but later on, Baumeister does try to contact him again and try to finish him off because he's nervous now. So this individual, this 6'7" male, is going to go on to become a police informant to share a lot of information with them and tell them what happened. And then he's going to be working with the police to provide information and try to get Baumeister arrested for perhaps the string of disappearances involving gay men that have been going on. And I mean, we've talked about the method in which Baumeister operated, luring men back to Fox Hollow. And I really do give credit to Brian Roberson because he actually included all the names of the victims here on his channel. And the confirmed victims of Herb Baumeister, the serial killer, were Johnny Bayer, age 20, Alan Wayne Broussard, age 28, Roger A. Goodlett, age 33, Richard D. Hamilton, age 20, Stephen S. Hale, age 26, Jeff Allen Jones, age 31, Michael Kieran, age 46, Manuel Resendez, age 31. Okay, but the thing is, though, it's like no one necessarily knows how many people he murdered. I mean, because he was also dumping bodies along I-70. He was targeting people on I-70. He's using the excuse of going out for business trips. And the thing is, though, that his wife, Julie, says when he said he was going out for business trips and going to the state of Ohio, he actually was going to business trips and he was traveling with other people. And oftentimes when people talk about serial killers, they mention some things about how this person must have had accomplices, this person must have been involved with a group, not necessarily a thrill kill club, but maybe perhaps, and if there's any case of some type of thrill kill club going on, or there's some type of person who is aiding and abetting Herb Baumeister, we would have to say that this could be a very viable situation. This could be a very likely situation. But, you know, in terms of warning signs, Herb Baumeister had 3 children with his wife, Julie. One time, one of the children and Julie stumble across something that appears to be human remains on this property where they live. And then they think something is very suspicious about this. And years later, Julie would alert the police and show them everything that was going on. And the way that they described her reaction was she looked like she was just about to collapse out of fear and out of shock. But at the same time, she's the one who showed them the property, and she was the one who encouraged them to be looking around for evidence. So what you can see really very clearly is there were definitely warning signs, let alone partnered with all of the abnormal behavior, the antisocial behavior that Herb Baumeister was experiencing as he was growing up. I mean, there were definitive warning signs. And when he was a teenager, this is one of the most shocking details in the entire case. It's like you could see that his family had firsthand knowledge because Baumeister was committed to a mental institution. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia, but when he exited the institution, he didn't receive any further treatment. I mean, you want to talk about warning signs. And I believe very specifically, they talked about how he had somewhat of a split personality. I don't believe it's something like Sybil Isabel Dorset, where multiple personalities are living within him, but just more like his behavior and mood, like there's like a very dark side that can come out very easily. But when you watch the videography of Herb Baumeister, he's somebody who is so plain, so simple. He's so warm when he speaks. And there's this video of him, and it's a little hard to hear, but he's saying something to the effect of, all I want for Christmas this year is world peace, peanuts, and a hug. He says something like that. He is, definitely, I mean, I can understand on the one hand why people who didn't know him that well would be very shocked to find out that he was a serial killer. But on the other hand, what was the name of the neuroscientist? Kent Keel, who also said the reason why serial killers make people think they are normal is because they are normal. I mean, they are actually living the way that normal people are living. It's just from time to time, they give in to these sexually motivated urges, which really stems a lot, as we said, from the neurological functioning, from the orbitofrontal cortex and the amygdala, not being able to feel emotion when their urges are pushing them to do destructive things. Or if they do something very destructive, such as strangling men to death, then they don't feel that sense of remorse or grief or empathy or sympathy. They don't have that type of awareness. Now, I mean, I think Baumeister must have experienced something very traumatic in his childhood that perhaps it might even be unknown to his parents. I'm thinking along the lines of physical, sexual, or emotional abuse. That is by no means a justification. Anyone who takes things to this level, once again, we aren't even entirely sure how many people he murdered. And in the documentary about the I-70 Strangler, they say it's possible they can connect him to 21 murders, but no one is necessarily sure because, once again, he never admitted to anything. I mentioned that he would go on to commit suicide in Canada, or after fleeing the police. And in his car, they found a 3-page suicide note that detailed why he committed suicide, but it was talking about his business was in trouble. He was getting a divorce from his wife. He was talking about the stresses of life. No mention of the murders, and he took all the secrets to the grave with him. What I can say about this one is there are a wide variety of reasons why people go on to commit these types of crimes. And I have to say, though, that I'm very much reminded of John Wayne Gacy because Gacy was also a bisexual, and he perhaps committed the murders of other men because he was ashamed of his homosexuality. And also, Gacy was heavily abused by his father. But, you can definitely see there's some type of element going on there. And also, perhaps Baumeister didn't want people to know about this dark secret. And at first, he completely denied that he was a homosexual. I found a website called crimelibrary.com, and I'll include a link to this one in the description box, because with this one, they had a book-length set of material on Baumeister. There were 12 chapters that had been uploaded to this crime library. And one of the things that is in one of the chapters that I was reading was that his wife reported that they only had sex 6 times in 25 years. They only had sex 6 times in the 25 years of marriage. Now, do I necessarily believe that? I think that's highly unlikely. I can accept that they probably didn't have sex very frequently, but he fathered 3 children, and while it only requires 1 time to have sexual intercourse, to get pregnant, like it only takes 1 time, that's a famous expression. I mean, 6 times in 25 years and he was still successfully able to father 3 children. I mean, the odds would be against that, but it definitely seems like he was perhaps using his wife as a beard, and I do accept that he was a bisexual, but I mean, beard's kind of an outdated expression. He's using her as just a way to appear normal, when in reality, he's living this life of destruction. But because of all the human remains that have been found on Fox Hollow Farm, people are viewing this as a breeding ground for ghosts, paranormal activity, and there are a lot of legends that are going to be coming from this place. But the thing is, though, with this particular story, you see someone who exhibited an enormous amount of warning signs, and many people just didn't catch on. And I mean, they also just described him as somebody who would do things that he would find funny, but were just always way too extreme. And with things of that nature, I definitely think there's a connection between that type of behavior and an imbalance in dopamine and serotonin. Because, I mean, one of the functions of antipsychotic medication is that it can decrease the dopamine level, and dopamine would also be fueling excitement. They use this term so frequently when they're talking about Baumeister. They say that he was doing things to fuel his own excitement. Even erotic asphyxiation, that's doing things to fuel his own excitement. But when this is partnered with the neurological programming, where they aren't going to be experiencing grief and remorse and sympathy and empathy, that leads to very destructive behaviors, and someone is probably going to be rather indifferent to that in terms of caring about other people, but they're going to be very much in favor of doing harm to other people to improve their own urges, like to have the dopamine surge running through the brain, to have that elated feeling that comes from excitement, even though they're doing heinously destructive things. But yes, the police did suspect that Baumeister was up to something, and they did investigate. And when they were zeroing in on him, he fled the scene. He's very obviously guilty. But we will never know all of the evils that he truly committed. Well, that's all for me. Now, if you have anything you would like to contribute here, I would love to see your comments in the section below. And I would also like to give a big shout out to the YouTuber Fliss Flisher. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Flisher. Fliss. And I watched her video as well, and she shared some very good things and some very informative things about Herb Baumeister and the haunting of Fox Hollow Farm. All right, if anybody has anything they would like to contribute, please drop something in the comments section below. If you like this upload, you can hit the like button. It really helps out the channel. And I will see you on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.